The crisp October air stung Gabriella Turner's cheeks as she stared at the email that would change her life, though she didn't know it yet. The prestigious Westbrook Children's Hospital charity gala had just landed in her lap after the original event planner had abruptly quit. As the owner of Budget Brilliance, a small but growing event planning company, Gabriella Gabby to her friends saw this as both her biggest opportunity and potentially her most spectacular failure. 3 weeks to plan a $500,000 fundraiser, she muttered to herself, calculator in hand as she worked through preliminary numbers in her downtown office. They want champagne dreams on a beer budget. The phone on her desk rang, and Gabby snatched it up without checking the caller ID. Budget Brilliance, this is Gabriella. Miss Turner, this is Patricia Westbrook from the Hospital Foundation. We're adding another name to the planning committee, Vincent Yates. He's a significant donor and the board thinks his input would be valuable. Gabby scribbled the name down. Vincent Yates, should I know him? A pause. He's the CEO of Yates Development. Surely you've heard of him. The name clicked. Yates Development was responsible for half the modern skyline of the city luxury condominiums, office towers, and high-end retail spaces. Vincent Yates was a self-made millionaire who'd started with one fixer-upper and built an empire. Of course, Gabby lied. I'll reach out to him right away. After hanging up, she immediately Googled him. The images showed a man around 35, with dark hair, intense eyes, and the kind of confident smile that came from never being told no. Handsome in that polished, unapproachable way that screamed money and power. Great, she sighed. Another rich guy who thinks he knows everything about event planning because he's attended a few parties. The next morning, Gabby arrived at the hospital's conference room 15 minutes early, arms loaded with presentation boards and budget spreadsheets. She was setting up when the door opened. You must be the new event planner. The voice was deep and smooth. Gabby turned to see Vincent Yates standing in the doorway, more imposing in person than in his photos. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but his smile seemed genuine enough. Gabriella Turner, she said, extending her hand. Budget Brilliance. His handshake was firm, his hand warm. Vincent Yates, though I suppose you know that already. I did my homework, she admitted. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Yates. Vince, please. His eyes swept over her presentation materials. Looks like you're prepared. Before she could respond, the other committee members began arriving. The meeting was a blur of introductions, expectations, and increasingly unrealistic demands. We need at least 30 more seats than last year, said Dr. Harrington, the hospital's chief of pediatrics. And the Bellevue String Quartet for entertainment, added Patricia. Plus a celebrity auctioneer for the charity auction, chimed in another board member. Gabby kept her professional smile fixed in place as she made notes, mentally calculating the growing expenses against their fixed budget. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. I understand what made previous galas successful, and I appreciate your vision. However, we need to be realistic about what's possible with the current budget. The room fell silent. Challenging the board wasn't in her playbook, but neither was setting herself up for failure. I've prepared 3 scenarios, she continued, distributing handouts. Option 1 maintains all the elements you've mentioned, but requires raising the budget by 30%. Option 2 keeps within budget, but requires prioritizing certain elements over others. Option 3 is my recommendation. It stays within budget while maximizing impact through some creative alternatives. She watched as they reviewed her meticulous breakdowns, waiting for the inevitable pushback. I like option 3, Vince said, surprising her. Creative solutions are always more interesting than throwing money at problems. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Gabby felt a strange connection, like he actually saw her, not just as the hired help but as someone with valuable expertise. The rest of the committee reluctantly agreed to review her proposal, and the meeting adjourned. As Gabby gathered her materials, Vince lingered behind. That was impressive, he said. Most people don't stand their ground with this crowd. I can't deliver the impossible, she replied, and I won't pretend I can. A small smile played at his lips. How about coffee? I have some ideas about sponsors who might help stretch that budget of yours. Gabby hesitated. Professional networking was essential, but something about Vince Yates made her nervous in a way that had nothing to do with his wealth or status. I have another appointment, she lied. But I'd appreciate an email with your thoughts. If he was offended by her rejection, he didn't show it. Of course, I'll send something over today. True to his word, Vince emailed a list of potential sponsors by that afternoon, complete with contact information and notes about their giving histories. It was thoughtful, thorough, and genuinely helpful, not what she had expected from a millionaire whose involvement she'd assumed would be superficial at best. Over the next week, Gabby threw herself into planning. She negotiated with vendors, called in favors, and stretched every dollar until the budget began to take shape. She was at her office late one evening, surrounded by fabric swatches and menu options when her phone rang. "Still working?" Vince asked when she answered. "How did you get my personal number?" she countered, though not unkindly. "Patricia gave it to me, committee business." There was a pause. "I'm at the hospital venue space looking at the layout. Something's not working with the floor plan you sent over. Any chance you could stop by?" Gabby glanced at her watch. Almost 9 p.m. "Now, I'm heading out of town tomorrow for 3 days. If we don't solve this tonight, it might delay some of your planning," she sighed. "Give me 20 minutes. When she arrived at the hospital's event hall, she found Vince alone, sleeves rolled up, his jacket discarded over a chair. He'd moved some of the tables around from her original floor plan. The flow was off, he explained as she approached. People would have been bottlenecked at the entrance to the auction area. Gabby studied the new arrangement, surprised to find he was right. "How did you catch that?" "I develop spaces for a living," he said with a shrug. "Traffic flow is kind of my thing." For the next hour, they reworked the floor plan together. Vince was insightful but never condescending, offering suggestions rather than demands. As they worked, Gabby found herself relaxing, even laughing at his dry observations about previous fundraisers he'd attended. "The Pearsons' gala last year was a disaster," he told her. "Candles too close to the centerpieces. The fire department made an appearance before dessert." "That's why my plans specify flameless candles," Gabby said. "Less romantic but fewer emergency vehicles." His laughter was unexpectedly warm. "Practical, I like that." When they finished, Vince offered to walk her to her car. The night air was cool, and Gabby pulled her light jacket closer around her shoulders. "So how does someone with your talent end up at a small company called Budget Brilliance?" he asked as they walked. "Seems like you could be planning celebrity weddings or corporate retreats for tech giants." "I started the company myself 2 years ago," she explained. "After working for one of those high-end firms where the solution to everything was to throw more money at it. I realized there was a market for beautiful events that didn't break the bank." Vince nodded thoughtfully. "So it's not just a job, it's a philosophy." "Exactly. Luxury isn't about spending the most, it's about creating something meaningful within your means." They reached her car and an awkward silence fell between them. "Thank you for coming out tonight," Vince finally said. "I appreciate your dedication." "Just doing my job," Gabby replied, but she smiled as she said it. The next 2 weeks flew by in a flurry of activity. Despite his busy schedule, Vince remained actively involved in the planning, joining Gabby for vendor meetings when possible and offering insights that consistently improved her plans while respecting her expertise. They developed an easy working relationship that occasionally felt like something more moments when their eyes would meet a beat too long, or when their hands would brush while reviewing documents. Gabby tried to ignore the growing attraction. Vincent Yates wasn't just out of her league, he occupied a different universe. Men like him dated socialites and models, not practical event planners obsessed with spreadsheets and discount negotiations. A week before the gala, disaster struck. The catering company Gabby had booked called to inform her that a fire had damaged their kitchen facilities, and they wouldn't be able to fulfill their contract. "I've contacted every affordable caterer in the city," Gabby told the emergency committee meeting that afternoon. "They're all booked. The only available options would blow our food budget by 200%. The room erupted in panicked discussions until Vince cleared his throat. "I might have a solution," he said. "My sister-in-law owns Savour Bistro. They don't typically do events this size, but she owes me a favor. Let me make a call." 20 minutes later, he returned with good news. "Georgia can do it at the original budget. She'll need to bring in extra staff, but she says it's doable." "Thank you," Gabby said fervently when the meeting ended. "You just saved this event." "It's in my interest for this to succeed too," he reminded her. "The hospital's pediatric cancer wing was there for my nephew last year. This isn't just another social obligation for me." The admission surprised her. Despite working closely with Vince for weeks, he rarely shared personal details. "I didn't know that," she said softly. "He's in remission now," Vince added, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "But not every family gets that outcome. That's why this fundraiser matters." In that moment, Gabby saw beyond the wealth and the power suit to the man underneath someone who cared deeply and used his resources to make a difference. It made her growing feelings for him even harder to dismiss. The night before the gala, Gabby was at the venue for final preparations when Vince arrived with coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her a cup. "How are the nerves?" "Surprisingly under control," she admitted. "Everything's ready. Now we just have to hope nothing catches fire or floods overnight." "Always the optimist," he teased. They walked through the space together, admiring the transformation. The hospital's ordinary event hall had become an elegant winter wonderland, with twinkling lights, crystal accents, and tasteful decorations that looked far more expensive than they actually were. "It's beautiful, Gabby," Vince said quietly. "You've created something special here." The use of her nickname, something he'd never done before, sent a warm flutter through her chest. "We did," she corrected him. This was a team effort. Their eyes met, and for a moment she thought he might say something more. Instead, he glanced at his watch. "I should go, big day tomorrow." "Right," she agreed, ignoring the pang of disappointment. "See you at the gala." The night of the event, Gabby arrived hours early, dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue gown she'd found on sale last season. Her focus was entirely professional as she directed staff, checked details, and solved last-minute problems. She was speaking with the auction coordinator when she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she found Vince watching her, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo that made her momentarily forget what she'd been saying. "Everything looks incredible," he said, his eyes taking in not just the venue but her as well. "You look beautiful, Gabriella." "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You clean up pretty well yourself." As guests began to arrive, Gabby slipped into the background, monitoring the event's progress and troubleshooting as needed. The evening preceded flawlessly. Dinner was delicious. The string quartet, a local music school ensemble that performed for exposure, and a small honorarium, sounded professional, and the auction items were generating enthusiastic bidding. During a quiet moment, Gabby stepped onto a small balcony for a breath of fresh air. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. "Hiding from your success?" Vince asked, joining her outside. She smiled. "Just taking a moment to appreciate it before something inevitably goes wrong." "Nothing's going wrong tonight," he assured her. "You've thought of everything?" "I had help," she reminded him. Vince leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "You know, when they told me they'd hired a budget event planner, I expected something. Less elegant, less thoughtful, less impressive." His eyes met hers. "Instead, I got you." The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. "Vince, I've been trying to maintain a professional distance," he continued, "but I'm finding it increasingly difficult." Gabby swallowed hard. "We've been working together, it wouldn't have been appropriate. And now, the event is a success, our professional obligation is nearly complete. Now," she hesitated, years of practical caution warring with the undeniable attraction she felt. "Now I don't know." "You're Vincent Yates." Don't," he interrupted. "Don't say you're just anything. You're brilliant, dedicated, and refreshingly genuine in a world where I'm surrounded by people who only see dollar signs when they look at me." Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he reached for her hand. "I see you, Gabriella Turner, and I'd like to keep seeing you if you'll give me that chance." Inside, the music swelled and the moment hung between them, fragile and perfect. "I'd like that," she finally whispered. His smile was brilliant in the moonlight as he leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. The remainder of the gala passed in a blur of success. The fundraising goal was exceeded by 15%, the board members were ecstatic, and Gabby received countless compliments on her work. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Vince's presence across the room, his eyes finding hers repeatedly with private smiles that made her pulse quicken. When the last guest had departed and the cleanup crew had taken over, Vince found her checking final receipts against her budget. "Still working?" he asked, loosening his bow tie. "Force of habit," she admitted. "I need to document everything while it's fresh." "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said. "Not to discuss work, not as committee members, just us." The directness of his request made her smile. Yes. Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant where the owner greeted Vince by name but discreetly seated them in a private corner. Over candlelight and excellent wine, they discovered how much they had in common. Despite their different backgrounds, both were oldest siblings who had shouldered responsibility early. Both valued authenticity over pretension, and both had built their professional success from the ground up. "My father was a construction worker," Vince told her. "He taught me everything about building things to last. When he passed away my senior year of college, he left me his tools and $10,000 in life insurance. I used it to buy my first property, a rundown duplex that I renovated myself while finishing my degree." "That must have been difficult," Gabby said. "It was, but it taught me that value isn't about what something costs, it's about what it's worth." His eyes met hers. "Something I think you understand better than most." As weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Gabby discovered that behind Vince's public persona was a man who preferred quiet evenings at home to flashy social events, who coached his nephew's little league team on weekends, and who treated her small business with the same respect he showed to multinational corporations. For his part, Vince was continually impressed by Gabby's creativity and determination. When her business began receiving more inquiries than she could handle following the success of the hospital gala, he offered practical advice about scaling up without losing her core values. "You could expand into larger events," he suggested one evening as they cooked dinner together in his penthouse kitchen. "Your approach would be refreshing in the corporate world." "I don't want to lose the personal touch," she said, stirring the risotto. "That's what makes budget brilliance different. So hire people who share your philosophy, train them to see possibilities instead of limitations." She looked at him thoughtfully. "That's what you do, isn't it? In your development projects, I try," he acknowledged. "Though it's harder at my scale, you have the chance to build something authentic from the ground up." 6 months after the gala, Vince invited Gabby to accompany him to the hospital's ribbon-cutting ceremony for their expanded pediatric oncology wing, made possible in part by the funds raised at their event. As they toured the new facilities, Gabby was moved by the thoughtful design elements created specifically for children: cheerful colors, interactive play areas, and private spaces for families to gather during difficult times. "This is what it was all about," she said quietly as they observed a young patient admiring the aquarium built into one wall. "Not the fancy party, but this." Vince squeezed her hand. "You helped make this happen." "Your ability to create beauty within constraints directly impacted how many beds we could fund." Later that evening, after a celebratory dinner, Vince took her to a property she'd never seen before, a historic building downtown that had been vacant for years. "Why are we here?" she asked as he unlocked the front door. "I bought this building last month," he explained, leading her inside. "It's my newest project." The space was dusty but magnificent, with high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and large windows that would flood the rooms with natural light when cleaned. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "What are you planning to do with it?" Vince led her to the center of the main room. "That depends partly on you, on me. The second floor will be offices for my foundation, the philanthropic arm I'm spinning off from Yates Development. But this floor..." He gestured around them. "I thought it might make an ideal headquarters for Budget Brilliance's expansion." Gabby stared at him in shock. "Vince, I can't afford, it would be a partnership," he clarified, "not charity. Your business expertise combined with my real estate knowledge. You'd have equity in the building from day one." "A partnership," she repeated, trying to process the offer in more ways than one. Taking her hands in his, Vince dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Gabriella Turner, you've taught me that true value isn't in what things cost, but in what they mean. And you mean everything to me. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Gabby's eyes as he opened the box to reveal a vintage ring with a modest but perfect diamond surrounded by sapphires. It wasn't the flashy statement piece a millionaire might typically choose, but something thoughtful that perfectly suited her taste and values. "Yes," she whispered, her heart overflowing. "Yes to all of it." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Gabby reflected on how unexpectedly her life had changed. She'd entered the hospital gala planning process expecting to manage a budget. Instead, she'd found a partner who valued her mind, her principles, and her heart. 1 year later, they were married in the renovated building that now housed both their businesses. The wedding, planned by Gabby's top associate at Budget Brilliance, was a perfect reflection of their shared philosophy, elegant but meaningful, with each element chosen for significance rather than show. Their wedding gifts to each other spoke volumes about their relationship. Gabby gave Vince a custom toolbox, crafted from the same wood as his father's original set, containing symbolic tools for building their life together. Vince gave her something unexpected: ownership papers for a small vacation cottage on a lake, a fixer-upper they could restore together over the years. "Not exactly what people expect when they marry a millionaire," he teased as they stood on the cottage's rickety porch during their honeymoon. "Most women would have preferred a ready-made luxury villa." "I'm not most women," Gabby reminded him, leaning into his embrace, "and this is perfect, something we can build together on a budget. The best things in life," Vince said, kissing her softly, "are never about the price tag." As they settled into married life, both their businesses thrived. Budget Brilliance expanded to include corporate events and destination wedding planning, always maintaining Gabby's core philosophy of meaningful luxury within realistic constraints. Yates Development increasingly focused on mixed-use projects that included affordable housing components alongside luxury spaces, a direction influenced by Gabby's perspective. 2 years after their wedding, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl whose nursery Gabby designed with her signature blend of creativity and practicality. Vince proved to be a devoted father who scheduled his work around family time whenever possible. On the 5th anniversary of the hospital gala where they'd first worked together, they returned as honored guests. The event was now planned by Gabby's company, though she oversaw it from a distance, trusting her team to continue her vision. "Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up?" Vince asked as they danced beneath the same crystal chandeliers where they'd shared their first kiss. "When you were stressing over spreadsheets and I was moving tables around." "Never," Gabby admitted with a smile. "You were the intimidating millionaire who I assumed would make my job harder, not the man who would become my husband. And you were the stubborn event planner who I thought might deliver a mediocre fundraiser, not the woman who would change my entire perspective on what matters." As they moved across the dance floor, Gabby reflected on the journey that had brought them together. She had built a career on creating beautiful experiences within financial constraints, never imagining that the same philosophy would lead her to a love more valuable than any budget could measure. In the end, it wasn't about what things cost but what they were worth, and what they had found together was priceless.